Coming to you from the all-new Live House in Hollywood, California.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Pensado's Place. You're going to meet our guest who's made hits with U2, Lady Gaga, Armin van Buuren, and a bunch more, and he's going to show you how to access your creativity. But first, remember to sign up our newsletter. Hit like, subscribe, and click notify. We will appreciate that. Hit us on our socials at Pensado's Place, at Herb Charlick, at Dave Pensado. Got a new thing for you called the Manager Minutes. They're coming your way. And we also want to tell you about a killer new school opening up in Miami. It's called the Abbey Road Institute, a highly specialized academy in conjunction with the famed Abbey Road Studio in London. It's going to be located in the Miami Art House Studio. That's home to multiple Grammy and Latin Grammy winner Julio Reyes Capello, and he will oversee the program. Our buddy and co-founder of Leapwing Audio, Robin Rumer, is the director of education. And I got to tell you, whatever Robin does turns to gold. So count on this being a superb learning experience. They're offering high-level courses in production and even in performance, which I really like. So I'd highly advise you go to abbeyroadinstitute.com to find out how to enroll. It's a good thing. Also want to do a shout out to all our friends in Nashville. A deadly tornado went through. We understand mostly everybody we know is okay, but we also understand that there was a loss of life, and whoever it's affected, we love Nashville and we send our best regards and hope everybody can heal and get better. Mother Nature is a monster. So shout outs to Nashville. And now for our guest, Fernando Garibay has a list of hits that's a mile long, just a ton of people. But he's also developed a model to tap into your creativity, which all of us could use. We recently sat down with him, and here's our conversation about his music making and the Garibay Center.
Good to see you,
Good
buddy.
to see you again, buddy.
All right, we got a lot to unpack.
Yes.
Let me do a little bit of it, and then we'll...
Do a lot of it.
Okay. Really from L.A., South Central L.A., insatiable curiosity, believed in mentoring, started doing that process very early. We always talk about one of the things that the greats have is curiosity that never stops. Yeah. It's part of the important process. Found yourself with great mentors, making music, got involved with Interscope, Lady Gaga, musical director, producer of big records, worked with a ton of people at Interscope, continued the mentoring process, but always had an intellectual and a curious approach to creativity and empathetic thinking and stuff like that. And that's now evolved into another part. Along the way, Grammys, top 10 dance records, all kinds of stuff. You're a busy guy with a busy brain. But what I think is so amazing for our particular audience is that when you take all the musicality, the fact that delving into that creative process and understanding and putting in ways to look at it differently can actually help your creativity if you study that process. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the foundation of what is now the Garibay Center.
That's correct.
Did I package that pretty well?
Really well. Yeah.
Well, I realize I'm not worthy of interviewing, so I'll see you guys later.
I'm here originally because Dave's been a big impact in my music, and beyond our relationship, it's his commitment to the artist and the integrity of the work from day one. Mm-hmm. Beyond saying to Jimmy's been a mentor, but saying no to someone like Jimmy, saying no to where the song comes first, mm-hmm. right? And mm-hmm. that's been really critical. I learned a lot from Dave. I started with Dave really early on, so I consider him another mentor.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. A lot of people have, and I think one of the aspects, because we're going to talk about networking, how important that is. I think one of the things that Dave did early in his career, even unintentionally, was share when people didn't share, when things were secret, right. and that kind of open source work and networking is something that became part of the foundation of this show, partially because of the way I was raised and partially you were raised. So let's talk about, because you're doing cool things with Armin van Buuren and Steve Aoki and stuff like that. Are you making music with them? Is that what's happening?
I was with Armin last night. Mm-hmm. There's we create content for extraordinary artists and extraordinary people equally. And that's like it's a wonderful externality. It's like a perk, right, at this point.
Yeah.
And, people like Dave, ourselves, we've been doing this for so many years that we start to look at why we start doing. You get to a point like, look, it's like a luxury sometimes we have, right?
100%.
When you reach a certain level of success, you get to a point like, what's next, right? Or this Grammys are going to keep you warm at night.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like,
That's
you have to
right.
find something more fulfilling, right? At that point, or you have to kind of delve into. I'll put it like this. This is how I, our personal case studies with musicians. You kind of have a similar dialogue over and over. You get, trauma is a great motivator, right? So creates what's called in neuroscience divergent thinking, right? And so in other words, it's a different way of seeing the world. If you're abused as a kid, or if you go through extraordinary circumstances as a kid, family legacy, knowledge you get passed on, all of that creates who you are, right? And so it gives you a unique way to see the world, right? And if you amplify this way of seeing the world, it's when you get to articulate this unique voice. And then amplify that further through the right mentoring, the right community of people, you get an opportunity to showcase that to the world effectively. Now, we've quantified this now, and this is why we have like a hit record every now couple of months, right? And a hit is, I define a hit, you must, like, I'm sure you're like, what's a hit record, right? It's the abstract question. Well, let's just define it as the number or ratio of connectivity to your target audience, right? If you want to write for a room of 10 people, great. You're going to have a hit with them too, right? It's your authentic relationship with your audience and understanding their audience and the connectivity ratio you have with them. So this philosophy started from working with Jimmy and people like Dave is, when you work at a major label and your job is to deliver a hit record to market, right? No matter what. If you're playing drums, if you're playing, you're writing a top line, you're programming, whatever, it's your job working with someone like Jimmy Iovine or Clive Davis, your job to get the song
Absolutely.
to that point, a level of caliber of greatness, right? No matter what it takes. Now, we can all train in our bedroom as much as we want, right? We can learn every single plugin. We can learn everything, YouTube University. We all have that access. But what's not taught effectively is engagement of the artist or the collaboration process in the room. Like what happens? So in our world, you have 5 minutes before the artist walks out the room because they have better things to do. They just got off tour. They're partied all night, whatever the case may be, right? So I realized that this process, and Dave does this really well, of engagement. How can you get an intimate, honest conversation where the artist is now interested or your collaborators are interested in working with you when they can work with anybody else in the entire world? And there's a line, believe me, there's someone right behind you, right? So we devised this model. I did it originally, and then I scaled it. And I start asking these certain questions, like, think about it. You're tired. You just got off stage, right? And you come to my studio, whatever. I'll say, Herb, what's your favorite song of all time?
Dave Pensado, Ides of March.
Me too.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay, so...
But I go September, Ides of September.
Okay, so follow me on this tangent. Was there a song in your childhood, growing up, that made you see the world differently? Can you describe that?
Oh God, how many? Probably Earth, Wind, and Fire's. You want me to describe the process of how I felt?
Yeah, I want you to describe what you like. Give me the picture.
Opened up opportunities, made you think about things that you didn't think about ordinarily, made you process differently, made you ask questions, sometimes confused you and you wanted the answer. It triggered things that innately made me process in a way where I wanted more things answered. And if I couldn't get them answered, I would go find the answers.
Okay, great. What was one, pick a song that, like, besides your family, because you have a very musical family, one song that made you see the world differently or give you an experience that changed your direction?
Might be a surprise to some, but I've spoken about this before. For me, it was because I was in Miami and Tampa, everything I heard was Cuban pretty much when I was a kid, which is still a big influence. I get a little Cuban in everything I do now. But I heard a blues song by Jimmy Reed. It was called Big Boss Man, and then followed by Bright Lights, Big City. And I guess I was about 7 or 8. And that's when I knew the path my life was going to take.
So when you ask these questions, do you remember the feeling? Do you remember like...
I try to recreate it every mix.
That's exactly it. So that's the pivot point. So if you can bring that out immediately, I have not had an individual not answer that question with honesty, because that's where the source is, right? And it's that inflection that we recall. We're just trying to recreate that essentially, right? But beyond that, we're trying to create our own version of that, right? And so my job is to remind artists and creative collaborators what their purpose is, right? Once I get them to identify their purpose, then they have a fuel source they can use beyond working with me. And that's what sustained my success beyond the technical aspect of what I do. It's the interrelationship. Can I inspire them to continue to keep working? Can I inspire them to think about things differently? Just from a simple conversation. That's engagement. So this is what I realized people like ourselves, creative, who have sustained longevity, it's no accident, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And it comes with the human side. It's the connection, the empathic side, right? When we met, I remember we met at was it Enterprise or what was the studio?
Abbey.
Yes. Do you remember when it was chaos? I mean, there was it was like a gun show in the parking lot. Like it was craziness, but. You know, you were just so cool under fire and just, you led. It's like, I describe it like you were the pilot, right? And, you know, the plane can go down or can lose, and you got to stay collected and cool, but also a deep empathy for the people around you and the music.
And I think that is true of, I mean, we're lucky in that for the last almost 500 episodes, we've had people sit in this chair that have been really great at their craft. And the ones who really stand out have that kind of empathetic thinking. If you think about a Greg Wells or a Mix by Ali or Josh Goodwin, or these are people who make people in the studio feel comfortable and tap into who they are. And they get repeated customers because they feel good about this. Phineas, amazing at it. Ricky Reed and so forth. And what is great about what you're doing is in being able to articulate it in such a way that corporations can go, oh, the process of music, people, really applies to what I do over here. And in some ways, there's less bullshit and more straight to the chase of how this is how these centers work for you and how you can apply them. And now bring it back so musicians can understand it and go, oh, I can put a process to this, and I need to be mentally healthy, and I need to do the kinds of things that's where I think the invaluable nature of it is.
Let me ask you a question.
Great pointer.
Like when I look at someone like Herb, someone like yourself, it feels to me like, and Herb and I have discussed this, sometimes spiritedly, if that's such a word. How much of that is innate? How much is that you're born with? How much of it is a function of your environment, all those things, and how much can you actually learn and improve it? Okay,
so what we now know, you know, like look at epigenetics, right? It's the environmental triggering your gene activation, and the reality is, you know, you can throw a dumb number like 50%, you know, genetic, 50% environmental, right? What we do. The question I ask myself is, how much is it malleable? How malleable is your brain? And what we now know is that through consistent repetition, we can change our habits, right? Consistent repetition, we can change our perspectives. And that is the power. When you leverage control and discipline, and we call it mental health, you can outperform your greatest expectations. Now, that's the key. And
is that a one-size-fits-all, or are there compartments where you can apply that, like, say, for example, in my world, apply it more to music than business?
Absolutely.
It can be, or does it one size fits all and business and music grow together?
You know, I have this practice I call orthogonal and lateral thinking, and it's just fancy words for saying I see everything on multiple planes and no more compartmentalization, right? And to your point, I think for the youth, the future, next generations, it's non-specialization with given expertise, right? So that requires...
Explain that.
Sure, yeah. You have to be good at a lot of things, right? To perform in the music industry or in artistry or even in business, right? You have to understand how to first manage yourself so you can better lead other people, right? And so this is when it comes to I think your point to, should you target focus and specialize in maybe your experience and your expertise in one thing, or should I hyper focus on one thing or focus on everything? Well, the reality is, once you focus on the inner, right? In other words, ask yourself these questions. Why do you do what you do? Why do you get up in the morning and choose to do something that might be considered by others as delusional, as to play the lottery and become an artist or a producer or a songwriter, right? Why, right? And when you ask yourself and answer honestly, take some work, and you acquire a fuel source that will empower you for the long haul, for what it takes to perform at that level. So I think it's important to look within self before you even start to begin to manage and produce and lead others, right? And you don't have to have years of experience. You can do this today, right? And there's certain steps you can take. It's just simple questions, purpose, right? Why do you have a choice not to get up in the morning, right? You really do. Like, but why? You start, follow me on this tangent. You start with, let's say, 7 questions. Why am I up this morning? Well, I'm up this morning because I need to pay bills, right? Okay, so what happens if you don't pay bills? Well, then, I won't have a place to live. Okay, so what happens if you don't have a place to live? Well, then I'll be on the streets. Well, what happens if you're on the streets? Well, then I'll starve. Well, what happens if you starve? Well, I might not survive. What happens if you might not survive? I lose my sanity. What happens at the end? Well, you take your life, right? So, and then you walk in reverse, right? Have you taken your life yet? No. Okay, so the odds of you taking your life is pretty low, right? Have you ever starved? Really? No. I have family that looked out for me. Okay, great. Have you ever been homeless? No. I have people that wouldn't let me be homeless. So you walk back and you realize these are all bit of illusions that the mind creates, right? Looking out for danger, right? And so there are these extraordinary behavior economic models that we can use, right? Real models, real frameworks, real structure to get to these kind of realizations, these inflection points of why we do what we do. Are fears really, genuine, or they're just products of a defense mechanism, a protective mechanism our brain creates? That's important to understand, because every day we put everything on the line as creative individuals and risk everything, right? The opportunity cost of doing our art, right, for the world, as well as the people around us. And that's really important. I highly recommend creating a structure where you take care of yourself.
Critical.
Right? We call it mental fitness, to be able to perform consistently, right? Because you can get to a point where you reach that success, like I'm projecting here because I've gone there. And, you find it's, might be vapid because you've never explored why you do what you do.
Let me add something to that I think is important, that I'm sure you address, but I think is important for our audience. And just to give you context, part of what we're talking about here are processes that you might not know that you have available to you to get in touch with yourself, your creativity, and have a better outcome. So we're going to be intellectual for it. But part of what I see, and people in my camp hear from me a lot of times, is you have to access truth. If you're bullshitting yourself, if you are surrounding yourself with people that are bullshitting you, if you're using technology to cover yourself, if you don't access truth, you can't get to the honesty necessary to get to the mental health stuff, to get to the things where you can grow from, to help somebody understand who you are. And I see there's a lot of sort of layers that people have put up that were different when we were all coming up together, because you just didn't have the layers. It didn't mean that people didn't find other ways, but you could sort of get through it differently, whether it was based on trust or personal relationship or whatever. But now people can be disconnected, believing they're more connected, and just create this sort of fantasy world for themselves, and then sit and wonder, why isn't this working? Why didn't this song work or this product work, whatever the case may be? So accessing that truth is important, whether you're on the creative side or you're working with creatives, because you can recognize that. And the people that have been successful that we've known over time find some sort of truth with somebody so that they can get to that art, they can get to that place, they can get to that place of mental health and so on and so forth, and let their creativity shine through.
Their authenticity, right?
100%.
the people want honesty, right? They want to see who you really are and to relate, right? And how do you get to that point? Is you have to do the work. Now, I would love to unveil what we discovered about what happens and how hits are made, right? So, okay, you can have people talking about, like, this is great because you have experts at, the technical side in creating content, the songwriting aspect, the production, engineering, all that, mastering, everything works together. But when you look at the big picture, I was having trouble repeating my success, right? And, and what I mean by that is like, this is 6-month window in the music industry or 3-month window, whatever the case may be, where you become irrelevant if you don't have a hit, right? Right?
It goes very fast.
Yeah, it's very fast, especially it goes faster and faster now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I decided not to live by that world anymore. And that started after Born This Way. I wanted to figure out, first, it came from a self-serving purpose. This is talking about the Garibay Center and how this came about. It came from a self-serving purpose of like, how could I scale what I do so, I can catch up with the market space because it's so demanding now. But what I realized by doing the research, luckily I was invited to speak at these great academic institutions, and I realized that people were interested in how I did what I did. And when I started showing people and students, mentees, the act of giving empowered me and reinvigorated me to discover what I really do.
Absolutely.
And I had no idea. I knew what I did intuitively, right? Like we all do, right? But I didn't have the vocabulary to do that. And if I'm going to help others, I need to quickly figure out what the vocabulary is. So this is why I, got deep into research in neuroscience, behavioral economics, neuroeconomics, you name it, all that fancy stuff to figure out what the hell am I really doing, right? And so when I discovered why I do what I do, and I shared earlier with Dave that, essentially, there's a lot of neuroscience evidence showing that music operates very much like a language, right? In the Broca's center of the brain responsible for language acquisition. And if you follow that theory, you can then deduce that if music is a language, then you're essentially becoming a better effective speaker as you work through your craft. Now, and then I was equally offered the opportunity to speak and lecture as well. And I realized I got the same feeling as making music. It's all the same to me. And then I started seeing everything as, again, nonlinear, like it's all the same. So this process of exploration is what I offer others. These inflection points, what we inspire others to do. So we created the Garibay Center by mentoring students from across the globe, from Jamaica to HBS to Oxford to Canada to South Central to Compton. Anybody who was great for 4 years, we took individuals, producers, songwriters, and artists, and we gave them our tools. I mean, our studios, our plugins. We gave them whatever we could to facilitate their growth. And what we discovered is that we were limited. See, in order to teach people greatness, they have to have done the work.
Absolutely.
Right? So there's this Malcolm Gladwell, as postulated there, right? 10,000 hours,
yeah,
right?
I was just going to bring that up.
Now, let's add another dumb number. So let's say the first 10,000 hours is to entry point, not mastery. Then you have another tier of 10,000 hours to mastery of your craft and your to get to that point of success. Now, what we figured out is we can take that to a fraction of the time by working with extraordinary mentors such as Dave and yourself, right? And that's essentially what this show is about, right? You're giving people the tools to fast track that process, but do not be confused. You must do the work.
Gotta do the work.
Gotta do the work. And what I'm offering is another intellectual attribute that musicians have and ways to find and create value for that. That's what's exciting to me. The most exciting thing I think I've ever done is create the Garibay Center for the purpose of aligning the greatest in art, the greatest in academic, and the greatest in the business world. Why? Because we all need each other.
Well, as an interesting point, not to go back on something that is tragic, and we recently did a show on Kobe Bryant. And we did the show because I'm a Laker fan, and his earliest influence on his sports career was actually Michael Jackson. And it had a lot to do with Michael explained to him how he had to be an individual and he can't blend in, and he's going to have to do the work and make the commitment and so on and so forth. And then later in his career, one of the big ones was John Williamson, sorry, the composer. And it was because he went and called him. John Williams said, I don't even know who you are. I'm not a basketball fan. He said, but the way you compose, how do you build momentum with the notes? What do you do with it? He said, I see myself as a composer on the court. And they created this great friendship that resulted in an Oscar. But the point I'm making is that the same attributes that went into his sports career, he put into everything else. He had to do the work. He recognized he had to do the work, and he had great outcomes from it very unexpectedly. I mean, you go off the court retirement, 2 years later have an Oscar because you did the work, you did the writing, you did the other kinds of stuff. So what I see is in the Garibay Center and other things and whatever our show does, you can't cut a corner. And the process is going to always go like this. I call it surfing, and your job is to stay on the board. It's not always to have a nice ride, but if you stay up on the board, whatever you have to do, and eventually have a goal, if you want to get to the sand, whatever the case may be, you're going to learn how to do it by doing it. You can't cut that corner. You have to access, a lot of times you're accessing the pain. You're actually enlightening yourself, and you're learning how not to have it in the future. And too long in the music side, that space has been just not talked about. It's been some sort of ethereal magic. So it's great to see you quantify it and move forward. When people get involved with the Garibay Center, is it are they coming to a certain place? Are they doing it online? How does the process work?
We're actually scaling now. So we've had a studio in Hollywood, and we're actually now going to build a multi-media environment, and it's going to be a 3-4 month build. But so we're moving to Hidden Hills and relocating essentially. But I think of it as I think of it as a runway, like a runway for opportunity. And if we have, it just came from Abraham Maslow, the idea of the father of hierarchy of needs, etc. But he would have an interesting way of testing athletes, testing performance. He would start with the best in the world. Right? Why? Because then he can deduce what the maximum human capacity of performance is. Right? So we kind of see our place that way. We start with the best, right? So we can teach others to become better versions of themselves, right? And a lot of the points you touched on, and we all go through this, impostor syndrome. What can bring your performance level down, right? What decreases your performance, right? We can say, impostor syndrome. You feel like someone's going to walk in and catch you. You're not a real musician. You're not trained, or you're not really educated. You're not really a performer. So everybody goes through this. This is natural. That's a metric. That's a good way of measuring that your brain's functioning effectively, because that's what it should do, right? And then second is, what about those days when you're tired? What about those days when you have people saying, nah, this is not good enough? Right. What happens then, right? How do you define success, right, at that point, right? So it's very important for people to understand that you define your success, right? And it doesn't have to look like everybody else's, right? Now, you want to be the biggest artist in the world? Great. Shoot for it. But that's not the only level of success that you can have, right? You define that. That's right. What makes you happy, right? You don't have to earn money. You don't have to earn, within a certain, reality, you pay bills, you get to a certain point where you're comfortable with, and I think in America, the standard, what is it, 70,000, 80,000 a year is where you get to that, level of stability and comfort. And then the rest becomes like, there's no real difference between like 80 to $1 million of income a year at that point, 80,000 to $1 million. So,
although I'd prefer to find out the difference.
Of course. But
we'll do some research. You take the 80, I'll take the million.
We'll have to go to his house and hit the hills.
Well, no, look, it comes from a need. Again, we have so much we can share, like so many topics we're touching on here, but it comes down to mental fitness, authenticity, performance, and realizing that musicians have these intellectual attributes that are very applicable to different parts of the world, right?
So we got a couple things we got to do.
Yeah.
One, this show is way too intellectual for us. No, I'm just, so we have to dumb it down with Batter's Box. And then we're going to meet a couple people who have been part of the Garibay Center. So let's get Batter's Box done.
Can I interject? Sure. I just want to touch on one point, because I think it's one of the most important things that aligns Pensado's place and the Garibay Center, is that we realized there was a need for artist development, songwriter, producer development, and there was a lack of funding for it.
Yes.
So we are trying to pair authentic, purpose-driven alignment between corporate, artistry, and academics to bring now funding for different sources so that we have
perfect
development.
Nexus. And let us know if
and
we can help with
authenticity,
that.
absolutely. It's all based on authenticity, right? We are looking for genuine, organic relationships.
We have a big platform. We can get the word out. So you and I are going to sit down and talk about things we can do. All right. So batter's box.
Be the guinea pig.
You ready?
Yeah, but
I'm ready.
I'm gonna preface this because I created a batter's box based on the old Fernando that I used to know.
Oh my! All right, all right.
So I want the audience to know this man has done Rihanna, Bruno Mars, Shakira, U2, Snoop, Steve Aoki. So that's a pretty wide range of people. And so he knows wherever he speaks. So we're gonna get him on this one.
Man,
I'm pretty sure I'm gonna win because he's been offered some kind of
Fire away.
Oh man! All right.
Live drums or real drums?
Define real.
It's not about me. Live or real?
Real.
Okay. Virtual synths.
Analog.
Chords.
A minor. Scale.
Tempo.
A minor scale, 4-chord.
Okay. Tempo.
130.
EDM. Strings.
Favorite strings? Quartet.
Okay. Genre.
Every genre. Agnostic.
Okay. Bass.
Rickenbacker.
Warren Buffett.
Investment.
Key.
A minor.
Okay.
Sometimes E minor.
He did good. He
Did
took his
good.
own course.
Did good. Very good.
Yeah, very good.
All right. So we're going to take a moment to introduce you to two guys who've been benefits of the Garibay Center. So we're joined by a couple of members and devotees and lead mentors of the Garibay Center. Miro and Danny are brothers. They have worked with a lot of major artists. How did the principles of the Garibay Center apply to when you started working with these artists? Did they come together and were they applicable?
Definitely. So we joined Fernando about 6 years ago. And, one of the things that I remember the first day meeting him was him telling us, like, you guys have the power to shift your reality and the way you see the world. So it's either you wake up in the morning and the moment you wake up, you see it in a negative light, or and you just feel victim to this current situation, or you wake up and just decide to push forward no matter the obstacles or walls or barriers that come towards you, and you just push forward.
So Danny, how's it applied to working with artists?
Well, I mean, first of all, the opportunity Fernando gave us to walk in and just kind of teach us the ropes on working with artists directly. It was kind of like you said earlier, like you have 5 seconds to like make sure these artists are interested and make sure they don't walk out and be like, oh. So the crazy thing was that once he took us in, the first thing he explained was like, you guys have to be able to show your strengths. So as far as like being like a producer on my end, I had to make sure that I make sure I'm 100% on my production side with the artist. So that's my strength. That's what I focused on. And we balance each other out. So it's just who's best at the room. You switch roles, but when an artist is in the room, you have to kind of adjust to what they're on.
What are some artists you worked with?
I mean, the first time we walked in, I believe it was Shaggy. Shaggy was one of the first artists that like we met where it was like a surreal moment for us being in the same room with them.
Sure.
Such a legend.
Sure.
And then from there, I mean, we've been in the room with like what we're gonna say, Armin, Kylie.
Crazy. Where are you guys from?
East
LA.
Black Eyed Peas.
Will I Am.
Black Eyed Peas, yeah.
And see, what's beautiful about it is that there is no cap on where you can go. You know,
Definitely.
once you unlock the
Yeah.
things that the Garibay Center helped you unlock and find yourself, and the more accurate you find yourself, authenticity we're talking about, the more you can bring to the table. Is that fair to say?
Definitely.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like Fernando had
I
mentioned.
mean, you guys are speaking at places like Harvard and other places and mentoring people like that.
That is
right?
correct.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it stems from your why. Like that was one of the things, like understanding why, what motivates us, what gets us up in the morning, and like for example, music for us was a voice, a way to express those emotions that we're not able to show, like as men in our culture sometimes. You know, just being vulnerable. You know, and that is so powerful the moment you're able to unlock, and when you're in a room and you're able to express yourself so genuinely, and from that's where you start getting people to open up, like on a deeper level, for just putting yourself out there and being you know, just genuine.
And may I interrupt? Describe this technique of throwing people under the bus
Oh my, it's
by brute force.
So for example, like when we got started with Fernando, I had severe social anxiety, like just being like maybe sitting down here with you guys. If it was like 6 years ago, I'd freeze up and not know what to
You
do.
won't be the
know?
first.
Yeah, so it's just, but one of the things
You
that
should see us in our early years. But anyway.
yeah, so it's just being thrown under the bus with something that like action gets rid of fear. The moment you understand that, like just take action whenever you're feeling fearful, just if you're stuck on an idea, it's just like Fernando would be like, hey, snap out of it. Like, just give me something. Like, give me a melody, give me something. And just through practice, I just came to understand it's just whenever you're stuck, just get out of that headspace.
Yeah, there's an acronym, FEAR, something appearing real. I have to find out what it is, but it just tells you that it's not real. The now the new studio's being built. I'm sure you guys are going to spend time in it. Can we come out and shoot in there and maybe do an episode or cover it?
Let's get it. We'd love that.
We love
Sure?
that. We love that.
All right, we're going to do that.
I wanted to touch on one point that you're alluding to, and dare to suck. How important is that?
Very important. You know, it's just the moment you really think about it, it's just a figment of our imagination. It's like of our head, you know, like we're just making this up. Like,
It's true.
just putting yourself out there doesn't matter. Like we always start with the first idea we throw out when it comes to music, right? Creating a content, it's not going to be the greatest thing, right? It's like, so we just start off with something. So just dare to suck. If we're all stuck in the room, it's like, just take somebody like, whoever, if you're feeling inspired by something, just throw it out there.
That's
you know,
right. That's
what
right.
you might think might be a really bad idea.
Sometimes turns into the best thing ever.
Exactly.
We've had 1 million people in this chair as I wrap it up who have, the mistake became the hook.
Yeah.
The accident
You don't know
became
until
the
you try.
cool thing.
Yeah, it's
and
happened
if
to me
you don't, you lose 100% of the games that you're not in. Right?
Exactly.
Tamiro and Danny Padilla, congratulations. I think that is fantastic. Fernando Garibay, we continue.
We continue.
This will be the
Thank
first
you.
of many discussions.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you.
Dave, take us home.
Sitting here thinking about what I'm going to say, and I realized that the techniques and the concepts they're talking about are very, very real, very, very true, and very, very applicable to our profession. Some of us are a little lazier than others about implementing these things, but it feels like when you get in a structure like the Garibay Center, that it becomes much easier. So I might have to attend the
you
Center.
guys, I'm happy to, and I'm honored for that. And I thank you. We will definitely have you guys over as regulars.
Bye-bye.